Alright, so today then is going to be the second part of informal logic. Again, if you like this stuff, we teach a formal logic course that you can take where you're going to spend 15 weeks talking about some of the stuff that I've narrowed down to 2 hours. So today we're going to look at fallacies. And there are literally hundreds of these things, hundreds of fallacies. I've narrowed it down to about the 8 or 9 that I think are the most frequent that you see out in the world. And fallacies are kind of tough to define because on one hand it's like a mistake in reasoning, okay? Not necessarily the wrong order, like with some of the deductive patterns, but just wrong thinking. And usually it's on purpose. It's someone else trying to get you to think wrongly. And on the other hand, it's also kind of a distraction away from the argument itself in some ways. So hopefully you'll gain some clarification as I go through some examples. So I'm going to give the fallacy, kind of talk about it a little bit, give a couple of examples, then move on to the next fallacy. So the discussion board then, like I did with the deductive patterns, will just be, a dozen or so. Hey, what do you think about this one? Do you think this is a fallacy? If so, which one do you think it is? Just to kind of test yourself and maybe your classmates if you guys reply to each other and so forth. So the first one then, the genetic fallacy. Kind of staying in the way of the board here. Genetic fallacy. So that's a matter of genesis, where something comes from. And so this is more of a, like astrology or something along those lines. Or if I told you I had a great idea for education reform, and I lay the thing out, the whole argument, and you are on board. You're like, yep, let's go for it, Dr. Schrappe. And then you ask, I'm just curious, like, where'd you come up with this? Like, did you read this somewhere or what? And I was like, no, I dreamed it last night. Some of you may be like, whoa, hold on a second. I'm now questioning this whole plan because it came to you in a dream, right? You would be questioning the genesis, questioning the beginnings, questioning where the idea came from, and be looking at the idea itself very, very differently. Now notice, that's not a criticism of the argument itself. Really what you're doing is you're looking at something completely unrelated to the argument. The argument should either stand or fall on its own regardless of where it comes from. But to dismiss it because of where it comes from is to commit a genetic fallacy, to fall into the trap of ignoring it because of where it comes from, or a non-reputable source, or something along those lines. I mean, even non-reputable sources probably get things right sometimes, right? So to dismiss it completely because it's from an irreputable source is to commit a fallacy. You have to look at the argument itself. Either it stands or it falls based on the evidence, right? And the order, which we talked about last time with the patterns. Another one then that's somewhat related, is kind of a subcategory or subspecies of genetic fallacy, is the ad hominem fallacy. Now, the ad hominem fallacy is an attack on the person, okay? So here, instead of where it comes from, it's more directed at who it comes from, who it is that gives the argument, right? And so you see this all the time in politics, right? Well, you can't believe such and such. This can't be a good idea because look at who said it. Or this can't be a good idea because look who said it. And look at the type of person they are. Usually when it comes to arguments, it's kind of not going to matter what type of person they are, unless they're making the argument, I'm a good person. Right? But if they're making the argument, let's just use education reform again. A great argument for education reform, it kind of doesn't matter if the person presenting it is a jerk or not. Right? That's to look at something unrelated to the argument. The argument should stand or fall on its own regardless of who's giving it. And so to dismiss it out of hand because of who it is that's presenting it is to commit an ad hominem fallacy. And this happens sometimes even in the world of philosophy. There was a philosopher, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Swiss philosopher, who wrote a text on how to properly educate children. He himself abandoned his children, so he did not educate his own children. So some are like, so see, we don't have to bother reading that, right? Obviously, he didn't believe in it either, or he would have done it. Whoa, time out. That doesn't mean that we can dismiss everything he said about how to educate properly just because he didn't do it, right? Go back to Heidegger. We can't dismiss everything Heidegger said just because it happens that he's a Nazi. To do so would be to commit an ad hominem fallacy. Now, where it gets complicated, with the ad hominem especially, is because sometimes it does matter who it is that it's coming from. For instance, let's say someone comes in and interviews to work at a preschool or a daycare, and they have these fantastic ideas as to how to, really get the most out of the hours that the children spend there. And you are all in, you're on board. That's a fantastic idea. We just need to do the background check, really just a formality. And the background check comes back that they are a convicted pedophile. They should not get the job. Right? I think we can probably all agree. They should not get the job. Now notice, it has nothing to do with what they said, it has to do with their actions, with who they are. That's ad hominem. But since it's a legitimate reason, it's a legitimate attack upon who they are, then it's an ad hominem attack rather than an ad hominem fallacy. The fallacy is misplaced. The attack is well placed. Now where it gets difficult is how to determine where that line is. So let's just go back, a few years ago to the election of 2016. For some, it was a legitimate criticism, a legitimate attack upon Donald Trump's candidacy, the fact that he had never held an elected office before. That'd be an ad hominem attack if it's legitimate. For others, that was a strength of his campaign, was the fact that he'd never held political office before. So all these people attacking him because of that were really committing an ad hominem fallacy. Right? It doesn't matter who it is, look at the ideas that he has. It doesn't matter that he hasn't held political office before, look at the ideas that he has. And so, here again, just like with the logic stuff, the truth of the premises is where things get fuzzy and blurry and messy. Is it an ad hominem attack or an ad hominem fallacy? Is it legitimate or illegitimate? A legitimate attack upon the person or an illegitimate attack upon the person can also sometimes get rather fuzzy and complicated and blurry. If it's attacking the person, it's an ad hominem something. Legitimate would be an attack, illegitimate would be a fallacy. Again, sometimes timing matters. In the world of philosophy, again, Friedrich Nietzsche, whom we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, famously proclaimed the death of God. Nietzsche also famously went nutso later in life. It was at one time believed that he contracted syphilis and therefore caused mental disorders. That one's kind of been debunked. It probably wasn't syphilis, it was something else, it's some other type of mental disorder. Anyway, he did suffer from mental disorder later in life. So to dismiss everything he said about the death of God because he went crazy would be to commit an ad hominem fallacy because he went crazy after he wrote the death of God stuff. Had he written that during his mental instability, then that would be a legitimate attack. Well, maybe he didn't even believe it himself, right? Maybe this does call him to question the argument because he didn't have his full faculties about him. But that's not the case. He wrote that stuff before. So to dismiss it, to get distracted by this other thing about him, rather than look at the argument itself, is to commit the fallacy instead. Okay. Straw man. Now, when I hear the phrase straw man, I think about a scarecrow. And a scarecrow in a really hard wind is going to get blown apart. Going to get blown off the stake and get torn apart, right? A strong wind will destroy a man made of straw, a scarecrow. And that's the point here, too. A straw man will always be someone else telling you what somebody said. So it's not going to be person A telling you anything. It's going to be person B telling you what person A really means, what they're really trying to say. And so what I, person B, am really doing is intentionally misrepresenting what person A is saying so that you realize how ridiculous person A is and how ridiculous their idea is. I'm going to make it seem ridiculous so that I can defeat it more easily. I'm going to present it as a man made of straw rather than an actual argument so that I can blow it away and it disappears. I can make it seem ridiculous if I'm telling you what they really mean. Right? So there's always going to be this other person involved with the straw man argument. Again, this happens all the time in politics. Well, so-and-so says something, but what they really mean is, you don't know? You know what they really mean? Like whatever happened to, taking people at their word? They say this thing, maybe that's what they really mean, is this thing that they said. It's crazy, I know. Try to drill it into my own kids. Mean what you say what you mean, right? Which is why language needs to be precise. Go back to the logic stuff, right? Even some of those examples, right, were very, very similar. But switching a few things around changes everything. It's about precision and accuracy in what you say and what you write, so that everyone understands what you mean because it's what you said. Precision and accuracy. Right? So the straw man, and this would be easy. This would be easy for someone like a philosophy teacher to do with every philosopher they talk about in class. Right? Because obviously, Dr. Schrappe is a person, and Dr. Schrappe has his own philosophical ideas about all of the stuff that we talk about, but I have to fight very hard not to present everyone we talk about that I disagree with as ridiculous. I could. You may or may not know the difference, but I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to present everyone legitimately, not as a straw man for me to blow over. No. As legitimate set of arguments, legitimate worldview, a legitimate philosophy, so that you can decide on your own what you agree with, what you disagree with, so on and so forth. Right? So I have to fight every presentation to not present you with a straw man. That's because I'm on your side. Right? You can imagine politicians, ad execs, marketers, so on and so forth, do this all of the time with their competition. Set them up as a straw man so they can blow them down, because then I win. It's about winning. Which leads to the next one, false alternatives. And so false alternative fallacy is where I present you with only two options, when really other options exist. And usually this works in conjunction with something like the straw man, right? So if I convince you that the only options are option A and option B, and then I tell you what option B really is about and how ridiculous it really is, then you're left with nothing but option A. Notice how well this plays into the disjunctive syllogism we talked about as well, right? Option A or option B, and we can even do or both. We can do the inclusive or, because my next piece of evidence is going to be not option B. So all you're left with, option A. Let's go back to the happiness stuff, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and all of those, right? They present you with the options, Coca-Cola or unhappiness. Well, you don't want unhappiness, not unhappiness, therefore Coca-Cola. Right? That all of the marketers of happy set you up with our product gives happy, anything else is unhappy. And no one's going to choose unhappy, therefore we win. They've given you false alternatives. Now, not every example of two options is an example of a false alternative fallacy. Sometimes there really only are two options. As I've talked about before, lights, they're either on or they're off. Even if they're dimmed, they're still on. There's on, there's off, that's it. There's no third choice. Pregnancy, either you're pregnant or you're not pregnant. If you're somewhat pregnant, guess what? You're pregnant. If you're a little bit pregnant, you're pregnant. It's on-off. This is how computers think. It's binary. It's ones and zeros. There are no twos out there in computer land. Two is just some combination of 1 and 0. That's it. On-off. Boom. Boom. Frequently, however, there's really more options available. Are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? Whoa, hold on a sec, pal. Lots of other options, man. Green Party, Libertarian, nonpartisan. Like, there's tons of other... Constitution Party. There are tons of other options out there. Democrat or Republican. Not Republican, therefore must be Democrat. Whoa, time out, hold on. I say that? False alternative fallacy. Again, when it comes to clarification, thinking again about strawmen, clarification brings us to the fallacy of equivocation. Now, equivocation is going to equivocate upon multiple meanings of the same word. This is somewhat akin to all of the puns on Laffy Taffy. Right? All these Laffy Taffy jokes, right? For example, so these are the dad jokes, right? I'm a dad, so I can tell them. So, dad jokes. When is a door not a door? When it's ajar. If it makes you groan, but then you also kind of sort of laugh, it's probably a fallacy of equivocation couched in a joke, right? Because a jar is an object, a jar, something you put other things into, but a jar also means open. So when a door is open, a door is ajar instead of a door. Fallacy of equivocation, playing on multiple meanings of the word ajar. Thinking along those same lines, thinking dad jokes, right? Equivocation, multiple meanings of the same word. When is a car not a car? When it turns into a driveway. Playing upon multiple meanings of turns into. Right? When you have a car and you physically turn the car into a driveway, or when something turns into something else, like a transformer. The first was robot to car, the second one was car back to robot. It's car. Back to robot. Okay. Or, let's see. At the end of the basketball game, why was the court all wet? Because the players were dribbling all over it all night. Dribble a basketball, or dribble like you're drooling. I know they're dumb. And yet, they're still somewhat effective. For example, there was a print ad I ran across not too long ago. Actually, it is a while ago. 4 or 5 years ago now. For some reason, I was looking through some old National Geographic magazines from the 70s. I don't know why. I must have been looking for some article. Anyway, I ran across this particular advertisement. Because this equivocation thing can also be a visual equivocation, too. And so, in this ad, it's an ad for Clorox. Clorox bleach. And in this ad, it's a picture of a child with glasses. Now, there are visual clues here. Right? If you see someone with glasses, what does that mean? It means they have poor eyesight. Yes, I know that. But beyond that, the presumption is, and they must be smart, right? We've worn our eyes out from so much reading, we must be really smart, right? There are people who don't actually have vision problems who wear frames, eyeglasses, with no prescription so that people will perceive them to be smarter. I know it's dumb, but they do it anyway. I know it's dumb. I don't know that I look any less smart like this. Maybe I do. I don't know. I don't look too smart with this. But anyway. So, visual clues, eyeglasses, especially on a child, mean smart. It is interesting to point out, people with hearing aids, we don't presume are great listeners. Right? We don't presume, wow, they've done such a great job listening for so long that their ears are worn out. That's why they wear a hearing aid. We don't presume that. But it's the same thinking with the glasses. They've worn their eyes out from so much. Anyway, so we see this child with glasses. And the ad asks, do you want bright children? Or brighter children? Okay. Now, see a kid with glasses. I'm supposed to be thinking smart. Another word for smart, right. Right? We talked about with Plato, light and dark. Light, that's smart. Dark, not so much. The blinking about. The enlightenment, right? About light and dark. In cartoons, when someone has a great idea, a light bulb goes off above them, right? Light, dark. Okay, so bright for smart. And the ad is asking, do you want your children to be brighter? Do you want brighter children? So since I got the picture of the kid with glasses, I'm now thinking bright in the context of smart. Do I want smarter children? Well, of course I want smarter children. Who doesn't? What parent have you ever met that was like, nope, I want my kid to receive less education? No, I want to limit his opportunities. I don't want him to be smart, whatever. No. Parents are always bragging how smart their kids are, no matter how old they are. Hey, well, my 2-year-old's already doing this. They're so smart. They're so advanced. My such and such is already. That's what parents talk about. That's why I don't hang around very many parents. But anyway, one of the reasons why. Anywho, so, bright and smart. And this ad is asking, do you want brighter children? Well, of course you want brighter children. Then get Clorox. And you're wondering, I don't get the connection here. Here's the connection. Clorox bleach is going to make your children's clothes brighter and more vibrant in color. Clorox is going to make your children brighter because the clothes they wear will be brighter. It's playing fast and loose with the meaning of brighter. Brighter meaning more vibrant as far as clothes, which is what bleach will do, versus, and smashed up against, brighter as far as smarter. So if you want smarter children, brighter children, you'll use Clorox bleach on their clothes. Of course it doesn't make sense. Of course they don't go together. But it works as an ad because, again, many people don't stop to actually think about it. Brighter children, yeah, I want brighter children. Oh, Clorox will do that for me? Sweet. Because marketing people, ad execs, politicians are counting on the fact that people are dumb. That people don't stop to think about things. That's why this stuff I'm teaching you, the logic stuff and the stuff today, hopefully all of the stuff that I'm presenting has some bearing on real life. Otherwise, I'm not sure why I'm talking about it. But especially this stuff here, because now you can stop and be like, whoa, hold on, time out. That doesn't seem quite right. Let's stop and think about this rather than just running out and buying it because some ad told me to. Right? This is the way that children think. Right? I was at getting my hair cut today at the place, and it was next to a food establishment. My 7-year-old nephew was like, man, being here is making me so hungry, right? Seeing the signs on the place next to the haircutting place is making me hungry. Yes, I know, because you're a child. You know what it wasn't doing to me? It wasn't making me hungry. Pictures don't physically make me hungry. But that's the point of the picture. It's supposed to. It's supposed to fool you into thinking that you're hungry so that you go in and buy some food. Anywho, there's fallacy of equivocation, right? There are tons of these, right? Again, pick up a Laffy Taffy thing, and one of the two jokes will probably be a pun, a play on words, which is basically a fallacy of equivocation, just in the comedic sense rather than in the philosophical sense. The classic philosophy one. So premise number 1, the first piece of evidence, only man is rational. Okay. Let's just, for sake of argument, presume it's a true statement. Only man is rational. Great. Mankind, right? Humanity, right? At least a bit more rational than dogs and cats and rhinos and hippos, right? Second piece of evidence, second premise then, woman's not man. Well, that's true. I mean, the gender woman is not the gender man. Therefore, woman is not rational. Whoa, hold on a second. Something happened. Time out. Something happened here. What happened was, within the confines of this argument, they used two different meanings of man. They were using it to stand in for all of mankind in the first premise, and then they specified gender in the second premise. It's really using equivocation, playing multiple meanings of the same word, man. It's meant to be vague to confuse you so that you buy into the conclusion. That's the point. Which is why, go back to the logic stuff from last time, the deductive pattern stuff, I was abbreviating. I was already nudging us towards symbolic logic, nudging us away from words and their actual meanings to something much more symbolic so that we could see the pattern, but so that we also don't get duped by equivocation, right? Because we're going to symbolize man as far as mankind differently than we're going to symbolize man, the gender. So we're going to see, wait, premise 1 and premise 2 don't have anything to do with one another. Equivocation. Next one, hasty generalization, which is exactly what it sounds like it is. So, doing this from my deck tonight, so let's presume that a dog hops the fence and attacks me while I'm shooting this video right now. It happens to be 8:03 p.m., okay? Now, it happens one time, right? Am I to presume then, based upon that one occurrence, that every Thursday night at 8:03, if I'm shooting a video, that a dog is going to jump the fence and attack me? Of course not. I'm not going to make that presumption based upon one instance. If I did make that presumption, if I leaped to that generalization about all other events, or events of that same type, at the same time, generalizing, projecting into the future, that's probably going to be viewed by most folks to be a little bit hasty. Like, one instance, probably not enough to stand in for all of the rest. What if, next Thursday night, 8:03, shooting a video, a dog jumps the fence and attacks me? That's 2 now. Now can we presume that every Thursday henceforth at 8:03, if I'm shooting a video, I'm going to get attacked by a dog? Am I suddenly going to change my schedule somewhat so that I'm not outside at 8:03 on a Thursday shooting a video? I mean, 2 is more than 1, right? I mean, we have another piece of evidence now, but is 2 really enough to presume forever and ever into the future? Probably still a bit hasty, but notice not as hasty as just one instance. If it happens a third Thursday, I'm really considering not coming outside now at 8:03 on Thursdays to shoot videos. Right, that third one maybe, now it's not as hasty, right? It's less hasty. It seems a safer generalization now after 2 instances, 3 instances, 4, 5, 6, right? As you get more and more instances, the generalization seems less hasty. Still a generalization, it's still a guess, it's still a projection about the future, but it seems a little less hasty because you've got a little more evidence backing it up, more than just 1, or more than just 2, or more than just 3. The hasty generalization will also depend upon how large the scope of your generalization is. Right? If I were to say every Thursday at 8:03 for the rest of time, that's a really big scope. If I were to say 8:03 Thursdays when I'm shooting videos the rest of the semester, ooh, that's a much smaller scope. Now we're just talking 3, 4, 5 weeks. So one instance standing in for 5 weeks versus one instance standing in for an infinite number of weeks. Very, very different. It's much more difficult to support a really large claim. The larger the conclusion, the more strict the confines of the conclusion, the more difficult it's going to be to defend. The looser the conclusion, the more easily it's going to be to defend, right? Because what you're doing is you're just saying, hey man, maybe, right? The argument for maybe is much easier to make than the argument for always, or the argument for never. Yeah, maybe. Sometimes it's an easier argument. More people are going to get on board with that one more easily because the evidence doesn't need to be as strong. Think about criminal court versus civil court. Criminal court, guilty beyond a reasonable amount of doubt. That's strict. A reasonable amount of doubt. Not sure how much a reasonable amount of doubt is, but a reasonable amount of doubt. That's strict. That's tough. The prosecution's got a hard case there. Civil court is just more likely than not that they did it. Much looser conclusion. Therefore, much easier to get a conviction. Because the prosecution doesn't have to work as hard. They don't have to fill every hole. They just have to be like, look, chances are, more likely than not, this happened. Much easier to defend that. Right? One of my former professors, his mother visited Central Park and got attacked by a squirrel. Unfortunate event. Great example for something like hasty generalization. If she were to claim then that all squirrels everywhere around the world are nasty, bloodthirsty, vicious beasts, like, whoa, hold on, it was one squirrel that attacked you, lady, come on. Seems a bit hasty to generalize about all squirrels everywhere. But if you were to say, all squirrels in Central Park, nasty, bloodthirsty, vicious, okay. Maybe still hasty, because there's probably still tons of squirrels, but far less hasty, because the sample size is not as out of proportion. One standing in for a bajillion versus one standing in for 1,000. Maybe still unrepresentative as far as sample size goes, but one's much more unrepresentative than the other. Right? Hasty to the max or something. The next one then, and we'll see a philosopher probably next week, maybe the following week, who wants to claim that, look man, almost everything that we claim is a hasty generalization. You know, we really don't have enough evidence to have a safe generalization about much of anything. We're always just kind of guessing hastily based upon our limited previous experience. We'll get there. The other claim that he wants to make has to do with this other fallacy, post hoc fallacy. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. That's actually what it is. We shorten it because, again, philosophers are lazy, so we shorten it to post hoc. This is every superstition that you've heard about. Or if you're an athlete, we'll call it a routine. It's a superstition. But we'll call it a routine, right? That you put on your right shoe before your left shoe, before every game. Because it's a routine. No. Do you really think you're going to forget to put both shoes on if you don't do the right one first? No. The reason you do it is because at some point in time in the past, you had a really good game when you put your right shoe on before your left shoe. And you don't want to mess it up by putting the left shoe on first. Because you think maybe, just maybe, the reason I had the good game was because I put the right shoe on first. That's a post hoc fallacy. Before the game, you put the right shoe on, then the left shoe, then you had a good game. Temporally, those were the events. Your mind then jumps to the conclusion that because this thing happened first, it must be the reason why the other thing happened. So I have two daughters. One's a teenager now, the other one's almost 5, right? So I am well versed in princess stories and fairy stories and ballerina stories. And so one of the classic tropes, one of the classic stories, archetypes is, let's say it's a mouse who goes to dance class and just can't dance very well. She just can't get these particular ballet steps down. Thankfully, the teacher has a pair of magic dance shoes that she then gives to the dancer. And with these magic dance shoes, suddenly the dancer can dance really well. And they're so proud, and wow, I'm really getting it now. These magic shoes made all the difference in the world. Then, it's usually the night of the performance. Oh my goodness. Mom or dad, probably dad, because dads are always schmucks. Moms always remember everything. Dads, even in stories, don't know what's going on. But that's a Schrappe issue with most stories anyway. So, let's say dad forgets the shoes at home. Oh my goodness, how can this dancer possibly perform without the magic shoes? Oh wait, the teacher reveals the secret. Notice the teacher's been lying, but the teacher reveals the secret. Wait, it had nothing to do with the shoes. The shoes weren't magical at all. It just gave you the confidence that you needed to actually learn the dance. Doesn't matter what shoes you're wearing. Go out there and do the dance. Yay! Right? But the student, the kid, thought, wow, I got the shoes first, then I could dance well, so I must be able to dance well because of the shoes. So the post hoc will always have because in it somewhere. Right? This thing, then this thing, so this thing, because of this other thing. Cause and effect. Now, clearly, a cause has to occur before the effect does. But not everything that happens before is a cause for everything that happens after. It's not the case. Not the case. And of course, there's the placebo effect and all that stuff. I guess Dumbo, I've never seen that one. I guess Dumbo's like that. He gets a feather that suddenly now he can fly because he has the magic feather. Okay, whatever. Post hoc. Right. All right. Then begging the question, otherwise known as circular reasoning. All right. So begging the question again gets misused outside the confines of philosophy sometimes. So if my wife asks, "Hey, what did you think of the dinner I made?" and I say, "Wow, the kids really had an interesting day today," she may say, "You're begging the question." She wouldn't, because she's married to the philosophy prof, so she knows that that's not a proper use of the term begging the question. What I'm doing is avoiding the question. I'm not begging the question, I'm just avoiding it entirely. Begging the question, again, better known as circular reasoning, because my reasoning happens in a circle. In order to accept the conclusion, in order to accept one of the premises as true, I have to already accept the conclusion as true. That runs things the wrong way around. Right? The premises should lead to the conclusion. I shouldn't need to accept the truth of the conclusion before accepting the truth of one of the premises. That's circular, right? Because I need the conclusion to accept the premise, and I need the premise to accept the conclusion. Circle, 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 circle. This could be things like synonyms, right? Well, a democracy is the best form of government. Why? Well, because a government of the people, by the people, for the people is the best form of government. Notice I haven't given additional support. I haven't given a reason why. I've just stated the same thing using different words. I haven't forwarded the argument at all. Just the same thing twice. It may also look like this. Another classic one. Well, I know that God exists because the Bible says that God exists. Or the Quran says that God exists. Or the Torah says that God exists. Or the Rig Vedas talk about God existing, or something along those lines, right? Okay, again, this is not Schrappe telling you God doesn't exist. We'll get to that one in a minute. That's argument from ignorance. We'll talk about that one in a minute. What Schrappe is telling you here is that circular reasoning. You can't base your belief that something exists on a book which tells you the thing exists. Because you have to already presume the thing exists for the book to have any legitimacy in telling you that the thing exists. It's circular. God may still exist, but you need a different argument to prove that. Right? Which brings me to argument from ignorance. Let's go back to the God one again. The argument from ignorance fallacy would be like this. See, since you haven't proven that God does exist, God therefore must not exist. That's not the way arguments work. Again, court of law. Since the prosecution has failed to prove guilt, does that mean necessarily that the defendant is innocent? No! That's not what it means at all. Lack of evidence for something does not prove the opposite. Just because I can't give you enough evidence to support the claim that, that marijuana is harmful, that doesn't therefore mean marijuana is harmless. It may still be harmful, I just haven't found the proof yet. Or it may be harmless. But your argument for why marijuana is harmless can't be because you couldn't prove it's harmful. That's the argument from ignorance. Right? You're not presenting an argument at all. You're just poking holes in mine. Right? The defense attorney is just poking holes. He's not saying, see, so my defendant must be innocent. He's just saying, see, you can't prove beyond a reasonable amount of doubt that my defendant's guilty. That's way different. Way different. So those are the main ones, I think, that are out there in the world. Right? Argument from ignorance you see all the time. Circular reasoning all the time. Straw man all the time. False alternatives all the time. Equivocation sometimes. Hasty generalization all the time. Post hoc all the time. Call them superstitions, call them routines, call them whatever you want. Placebo effect and all that. Ad hominem genetic. You see all of these all of the time. So here are just a few examples to help clarify. Then on the discussion board, then I'll post some more examples to see if it's making sense, to see if you understand which ones are which here. Okay? So here's a false alternative, for instance. If we don't go to war, we face nuclear annihilation. We can't accept complete destruction, so we must go to war. Hold on, are these really the only two alternatives? These are really the only two choices? Go to war or face nuclear annihilation. There's no third option, really? That'd be strange. I would imagine there probably is a third option. Alright. Snoopy's ideas about hyperspace travel are obviously nonsense because they came to him in a dream. Dream stuff, genetic fallacy, like where it came from. Or he got it from reading the stars. Genetic fallacy. Maybe what he has to say is actually legitimate, but you're never going to know it because you're dismissing it because of where it came from. Let me see. Most drug addicts drank milk when they were children. That's true, by the way. Most drug addicts did. So milk causes drug addiction. Something seems not quite right about that. Right? I'll read that one again. Most drug addicts drank milk when they were children. Therefore, milk causes drug addiction. One thing happens first. They drank milk first. Then they became drug addicts. Therefore, the milk must cause the drug addiction. Post hoc fallacy, man. Just because one thing happens first doesn't mean it causes the other thing. Post hoc fallacy. Milk drinking and drug addiction, no correlation, no causation. Because not only did most drug addicts drink milk when they were children, so did most non-drug addicts also drink milk as children. So, or, right, the one convict that I know drank milk as a child. So I guess all convicts drank milk as children. Hasty generalization. Which goes back to the stereotype stuff I talked about before when we were talking about Aristotle. Right? If you only have one person representing a whole bunch, it may not be very representative. Right? You don't know if this is your friend's preference or if this is a Burkina Faso thing. You don't know if this is your friend's preference or if this is a Brazil thing. You don't know. Because you've got an unrepresentative sample size. You know one convict and they drank milk, therefore all convicts drank milk? I need more than just one to make that generalization. That seems a bit hasty to me. I wouldn't bet my life on that. But maybe that's just me. Right, here's some more. Some more straw men. So here's another way you can probably tell a straw man. Is if one person says, "Oh, now I see." Right? If they say, "Oh, now I see," they're probably going to misrepresent the thing that was just said. For example, parent-child relationship. The parent says, "Your mother and I have decided we don't want you to date when you are this young. And when you are old enough, we believe there should be some parental supervision." The child, "Oh, now I understand." What do they understand? They understand what their parent really means instead of what they said, right? "Oh, now I understand. You're going to make me sit up in my room all my life till you pick out somebody for me to marry." The child has made a straw man out of what the parent said. If this is what the parent meant, that's probably ridiculous. That's not what the parent said. Let's presume that what the parent meant was what the parent said. That's very different than what was received. Very different than what was heard and then parroted back. "Oh, now I see." No, you don't. Or in Mr. and Mrs. The Mr., the husband says, "Our car isn't running right. I think we need to buy a better one, something more comfortable." The wife says, "Oh, so now you want us to buy a brand new fancy car. I don't think we have enough money for a Rolls Royce." Whoa, hold on. Nobody said anything about Rolls Royces. Nobody said anything about fancy cars. All that was said was, "I think we need something more comfortable." Blown completely out of proportion, making mountains out of molehills. "Oh, now I know what you really mean." No. Not what I said. Not what I said. Project much? Let's see. What else we got here? Those ones are dumb. Those ones are dumb. Okay. Alright. The plaintiff, in this case, says, Judge, I'm not lying here. I'm a religious person. Religious people don't lie. The judge, how do I know you're a religious person? The plaintiff, because I would never lie. Circular reasoning. I have to accept the conclusion that you wouldn't lie, in order to accept the premise that you wouldn't lie. You're saying the same thing, man. You're saying the same thing. You haven't given me additional evidence. You haven't given me additional support. No, you just said the same thing twice. A few more here. Jimi Hendrix died of a drug overdose. Therefore, his music was worthless. Ad hominem, for sure, it's about the person. When you decide legitimate or illegitimate, I'm going to go with illegitimate on this one. This seems like an ad hominem fallacy. The fact that he was on drugs really has nothing to do with whether the music is good or not. Let's listen to the music, determine whether it's good. That's it. That's all you got to do. What Ted Kaczynski, who was the Unabomber, wrote about boundary conditions in mathematics is shown false due to his crimes. No, being the Unabomber has nothing to do with the master's thesis in mathematics that he wrote at Harvard. These are two completely unrelated things. Right? The mathematics stands or falls on its own, regardless of who he was as a person. Well, then I'll end with this one. This one's great. So, well, no, two more. And these are both going to be examples of the hasty generalizations. The two men in the matching green suits that I met at the Star Trek convention in Vegas had a terrible fear of cats. I remember them saying they were from France. Never met anyone else from France, so I guess everyone there has a terrible fear of cats. A bit hasty. Notice it also would have been hasty if you would have said all fans of Star Trek have a terrible fear of cats. Or all people in green suits have a terrible fear of cats. Or all people that I met in Vegas have a terrible fear of cats. Right? Hasty, man. It's one example. One example. That's it. Unless you're making a claim about that one, it's probably going to be hasty. So I'll end with this one. This is the one I'll end with. So two characters. Character one, character two. It's going to be weird because I'm out of... Okay, I'll sit. All right. So here, yeah. This is it. So character one, character two. There we go. That's how we're going to do this. All right, so character one. You know, those feminists all hate men. Really? Yeah, I was in my philosophy class the other day, and that Rachel chick gave a presentation. Which Rachel? You know her. She's the one that runs that feminist group over at the Women's Center. She said all men are sexist pigs. I asked her why she believed this. She said her last few boyfriends were real sexist pigs. That doesn't sound like a good reason to me. That's what I said. What'd she say? She said she's seen enough of men to know we're all pigs. She obviously hates all men. So you think all feminists are like her? Sure, they all hate men. It's like a hasty generalization, nested within a hasty generalization, within a hasty... There's nothing but hasty generalizations. Right? One person standing in for all feminists. And those come in at least 4 different varieties that I'm aware of. Right? One person representing all of those. A bit hasty. Right? A few ex-boyfriends standing in for all men. A bit hasty. Right? So I'll post some other ones to the discussion board for you to kind of think through to see, is this a fallacy, not a fallacy? If so, which one? Just to kind of clarify some things. All right, see you next time.